So, Josh, you've had a chat with the makers of the upcoming vampire cooperative slaying game, Redfall. A lot of people have been comparing it to Left 4 Dead, but they've told you that it's actually more like Far Cry. Those are two very different games.
I sat down and had about an hour-long conversation with Harvey Smith, who's the studio director at Arkane, and Ricardo Bear, who is the creative director of Redfall. Ricardo said he understands why people are making that comparison. 4-player co-op, there's vampires instead of zombies, and fast-paced movement, which is obviously sort of the bedrock of Left 4 Dead. Whereas Redfall is more like Far Cry, an open world game where the space is the largest thing that Arkane have ever made.
One example to give that to show that it isn't too big is that there are no vehicles in it.
Yes.
So it's an open world map, but it's not going to be huge, which is really reassuring.
The second they mentioned Far Cry, I was a bit like, oh, that's cool, and also worrying. And the second they said no vehicles, I was like, perfect, because the world will be scaled to the fact that the whole thing is navigatable on foot. The world is split effectively into 2 districts, downtown Redfall Island. So
a small town with hubs and shops and bases and stuff.
Yeah. The second district is more rural, farmhouses, cornfields, creepy
big open
barns,
areas,
hidden
things. The cooperative push from them came from Diablo and Dungeons and Dragons, they told you.
So this is really interesting from Arkane, is the studio predominantly known for creating single player games. And, Ricardo sort of pointed out that, these two guys and a lot of the team at Arkane, senior leadership, they've all worked together for a long time. And in that time, in their spare time, they've been playing games like Diablo and then Borderlands. And, for a long time, they've been asking themselves, is there a way that we could make the sort of games that we like to make, complex, immersive sims, and merge it with the sort of games that we actually play in our spare time? And Redfall's the result of that. Harvey Smith had a great perspective on it, where everyone knows us for making immersive sims, but the reality of it is we're just D&D nerds who want to create like deeper games that are more like D&D. Like, I think Harvey called Dungeons and Dragons like the best co-op game of all time, which, it is. At the outset of Redfall, you'll have the option of choosing between one of 4 characters. You're locked in for that character for the rest of the game.
Okay. So if you're playing single player, that's quite a decision to kind of commit to.
And the co-op side of it, there's no restrictions in terms of party makeup. We could have a group, a 4-person team of the same character if we wanted to. We might have different cosmetics on, we have different weapons, we have different powers.
You wouldn't have a balanced team, but you're not going to be stopped from playing who you like.
Exactly. So, and the interesting thing is, in single player, if you're playing it alone. Like the AI, there are no AI filling those 3 other characters. So if you want to play it as a single player game, you can play it as a single player game. And once you start layering in teammates, the game will scale difficulty to that.
We're bringing up a lot of games to compare this to. Another one that I didn't expect is Borderlands. That I didn't expect, the fact that it's now a looter shooter kind of thing as well.
Initially, that gave me pause because Dishonored and Prey are known for having these really well-made weapons, really distinct weapons. And then suddenly you're saying, okay, but in Redfall, there's going to be a shitload of weapons. And it's like, okay, well, how's that going to quite work? And then there's also a set of like vampire hunting weapons. So shotgun that shoots, I think it was like a shotgun that shoots like stakes instead of
fire pokers or something.
Or fire pokers, and like that uses like found ammo that you're like discover. And then I kind of was thinking about Deathloop. Deathloop had a lot of different weapons. They were kind of archetypal, like there was a set and you got variants of those sets. And I think Redfall's going to be maybe a further exploration of that idea. So, and I think that's going to be the thing that really sets it apart, is how does this cycle of weapons match up and complement the powers? And I think that's where it will separate itself from something like Borderlands, which is, almost quite obnoxious in how much it pushes you to just switch and throw weapons away and obviously combine them with sort of a limited ability base.
Something else about the world coming together which I found quite interesting is that there's a day and night cycle, which isn't new to any games, obviously, but this seems to be one of the games where it just fits best. It's not like they're just shoehorning in a feature.
From what I gather, it's going to really change the flavor. Like, I think they're hoping that you start a mission in the early morning of the world and you're going to do the mission, but then you get distracted because you see something you want to do, or there's this or there's that, or the 3 factions are fighting and you just want to sit and watch, or whatever it might be. And then as that's ticking over, it's getting later and later and later, and suddenly you're approaching, like a barn that you've got to get into, and there's obviously different ways that you can try and get into that barn. But by the time it's nighttime or the sun's setting, you might find there are more vampires around. You might find that the cultists are out and they're creating all sorts of roadblocks all over the world that make it more difficult to traverse. So there's like a really interesting aspect to a day-night cycle there, which I think really fits with the both aesthetic of the world and the vibe of the story. Like, it makes a lot of sense.
Sounds really interesting. Arkane, I always think that they've reached too far with what they're doing, but then they always seem to nail it when the game's actually released. Like, never going to pull this together, then they do. In fact, what's your favourite Arkane game of all the ones they've made? Put us in the comments below. I know that's not an easy question to answer, but make sure you subscribe, and then you can get all the details on Redfall when we have them and when it comes out, and the review when it eventually comes.